Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear students, we are back again with a new unit here. We have just accomplished our unit 7, and we are going to go on with a new unit here, Unit 8. So let's see what we have here. Of course, we discussed the idea of mistakes, and we read a lot about them and how to deal with these mistakes. We had discussed different types and historical mistakes as well. Now we had a chance to discuss, and you had a chance together just to relate to your own experiences. Now we are going to move on from the word mistakes to something else. We have here a new word here, which is challenge or challenges. So we're moving from mistakes to challenges here. What is the meaning of challenge? Now we're going to relate to what we have in our unit. When there is a challenge, you face problems or difficulties. You might not expect to succeed. So some things, they are very difficult. We go on with them even though that we expect to fail or we do not expect success. But when you do succeed or achieve something, although there were obstacles and you weren't sure of the situation, this means that you were against the odds. So the phrase against the odds means that you succeeded under impossible circumstances. So let's just give a short example here. We can just see, for example, this man here, he's in an island. Now we can see that it is in a deserted island. He's alone, hungry, scared. Now what are the chances for him to escape this island? Now when we have someone to help him and there was an escape for him, this means that he was able to escape the deserted island against all odds. So he expected to not be rescued, but finally something else happened. When we talk about odds, we're talking about probabilities, specifically how likely something may happen. Now we have here a hadith. عن أبي يحيى صهيب بن سنان رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم عجبا لأمر المؤمن إن أمره كله خير له كله خير وليس ذلك لأحد إلا للمؤمن إن أصابته سراء شكر فكان خير له وإن أصابته ضراء صبر فكان خير له. So we are going to move with our 4th unit of the semester. We have here Unit 8, Against All Odds. Starting with our first lesson, which is the lesson discuss, we have our objectives. Number 1, to identify the phrase of against the odds by relating to real difficulties. Number 2, to explore situations. Number 3, to suggest solutions for difficulties. Number 4, appraise the group of 20 achievements. Number 5, to give the meaning of new vocabulary. Number 6, investigate personal experiences related to COVID-19. Now we have here the last objective here. COVID-19 is an experience that we have all passed and gone through. Now we are going to relate and just think about the challenges that we passed by throughout the pandemic. Now we're going to move on. We have in our books page number 110. Here we have the first question. Number 1. Despite difficult or unusual circumstances, things sometimes happen against the odds. People can achieve extraordinary things even when others think it's not possible. What is something you have achieved that you or other thought was impossible? So just think about the different challenges or the different experiences that you passed by. You thought that you may fail, but something else happened, or you achieved something that you did not expect. Now let's say, for example, a very simple picture here. Now some people, they enjoy dangerous kinds of sports. Now one of these sports is rock climbing. Now some people, they try to reach the peak of a mountain, or they just go to a very high point there. Now they do not expect to reach the point that they want, but when they do, this means that they achieved something against all odds. It may be very high, it may be dangerous, but at the very end they succeeded. Now we have the second question. Can you think of situations where different organizations or countries have worked together to find solutions to challenging problems? Now here, this is something more bigger. We can see that we are talking about something concerning countries and nations. Does it come to your mind any kind of experience or a challenge that groups of countries, they faced together and they had to deal with this kind of problem together? Now, just to complete here, tell the class about a situation involving your country or other countries in the world. So you can give real experiences here. You can talk about real things that happened and how countries dealt with them. Now, one of the famous experiences that we mentioned before is COVID-19. Now, COVID-19 was a time or a part, of course, that we all know about. We experienced lots of problems here. Now, what did the country do, or what did all countries do to deal with this type of virus that we had? Now, we're going to read about it in our books. Now, of course, we can see that there was a situation that all countries, they helped to just face together, and there were lots of precautions made and solutions done. So we have here the basic thing that we're going to talk about is the G20. Are you familiar with the G20? Now, what is the G20? We have here. Do you know any countries that are members of the G20? Now we have here the group of 20, the G20. Have you ever heard about these countries? Do you know what are the countries that are mentioned here? And what did they do? Why are they a group together? Now, this is something that we are going to talk about in our lesson. And also, just put in mind that we have also Arabian countries, they are within the group. So, did any Middle Eastern country take on the G20 presidency? So it's not just to be a member of the group, but also to be the president. Now, as we said, that this is something that we are going to read about, and also you are going to listen at the same time. We have here on pages number 120 and 111. Now, before we start our task, we have here the quick check. Now, complete each sentence with a word from the box. So instead of just matching meanings, we are going to just fill in the blanks, but this is going to be at the very end of our lesson. So let's just read the words and underline them to pass by and discuss throughout the lesson. We have the first word. If you can read it with me, we have the first one, disruption. Then we have here priority. Number 3, summit. Number 4, pledged. Number 5, safeguard. And we have number 6, vulnerable. So we have here, these are the 6 words that we are going to study in our lesson, and we are going to listen, answer questions at the same time. So we have on pages number 110, 111, we are going to start to read about the G20 and relate to the actual topic that I mentioned, which is about COVID-19. Now we have here the title. You are going to listen to the title. You can read it before. We have one question here. Now the question is, what is the aim of the group? Now you can see that we have here the paragraphs. Now, of course, there is an introduction, and we have here different parts, and also you can see that we have subtitles throughout the lesson.
Global leaders take a stand against COVID-19. The Group of 20, G20, is an international forum for economic cooperation attended by the largest and the fastest growing economies in the world. Founded in 1999, the G20 brings together leaders from 19 countries and the European Union to discuss the world's most challenging problems.
Okay, So here from the introduction, we have the first question. What is the aim of the group? Why is there a group? Now you can see that we have here the group to discuss the world's most challenging problems. Now we are going to start with the first part. You can see that we have three questions. The first question is, what happened soon after Saudi Arabia took over the G20 presidency for 2020? Now here, this is an interesting fact. If you do not know that, yes, the country was the president of the group at that time. We have the second question, what was the response? And we have the third question, who called the summit and why? So we are going to listen.
In December 2019, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia took over the 2020 G20 presidency. Not long after, the COVID-19 pandemic began to spread across the globe. The scale of the pandemic was so unexpected that most countries were unprepared to deal with it. In response to this emergency, an extraordinary G20 summit was called by King Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud to discuss how to deal with the crisis. The G20 leaders met virtually via video conference on March 26, 2020.
Okay, now going back to our paragraph here. Now, first of all, we have the first question. What happened soon after Saudi Arabia took over the G20 presidency for 2020? Now, you can see from the very beginning that we read about Saudi Arabia, and we have here not long after the COVID-19 pandemic began to spread across the globe. After that, we have the second question. What was the response? Now, what was the response? We have here, you can see the answer. Yes, in response to this emergency, an extraordinary G20 summit was called. Now we have here the word summit. Do you know the meaning of the word summit here? Now, summit here, we can relate it, as we mentioned before, about climbing mountains, that we reach the peak. Now, when you reach the top of something or the peak of something, now here, this means that there is the very high leaders, or we have here the group of the most responsible people. They group together in a summit and they discuss things together. Now, this is the meaning of summit here. We have also who called the summit and why. Now, this is the third question, and you can see that there is a name mentioned. So we have the answer. Now, King Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud, he called actually to discuss how to deal with this crisis. Moving on, we have the second part. Now, there is just one question here. What was the most important action for the group? Now we are going to listen and just look for the answer. There is an important action they are going to do together.
For Saudi Arabia and the rest of the G20 leaders, it was a priority to deal with the pandemic and its effect on global health, societies, and economies. The unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic is a powerful reminder of our interconnectedness and vulnerabilities, the G20 leaders reported in the statement they issued on COVID-19 after the virtual summit. The virus respects no borders. Combating this pandemic calls for a transparent, robust, coordinated, large-scale and science-based global response in the spirit of solidarity. We are strongly committed to presenting a united front against this common threat.
So actually we have here a little bit long paragraph here. Now let's see what we have. First of all, our answer. It is clear from the very beginning that for Saudi Arabia and the rest of the G20 leaders, it was a priority to deal with the pandemic and its effect on global health, societies, and economics altogether. We have here the word priority. When we say that something is prior, or we have here, this is a priority. So this means that we have something that is very important. It must be dealt with very quickly. And of course, it is at the very beginning of any kind of list. Also, we can see at the very end, just to complete what is important for the group here. Now here we are strongly committed to presenting a united front against this common threat. Now, this is something that they all agreed with at the same time. Now, we have here a word. Now, I just want you to read this word. We have here vulnerabilities. Now, we're going to pass by it again, just to put in mind that we have here the sentence. Now, it is a powerful reminder for our interconnectedness and vulnerabilities. So we have here, we are going to just go back to this word again in another paragraph. Moving on. Now, in this part, what do these abbreviations mean? Now, do you know the meaning of abbreviation? Before we start here, we can see that we have here our country, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Now, instead of saying the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, it can be abbreviated, or the abbreviations are KSA. So you are going to just look at the paragraph here, and you have many abbreviations. Just read them or listen to them and see what do they mean. Starting.
The G20 committed itself to working alongside other major international institutions, such as the World Health Organization, WHO, International Monetary Fund, IMF, World Bank Group, WBG, and United Nations, UN, to fight the pandemic. The leaders expressed their determination to do everything in their power, both individually and collectively, to achieve the following goals.
Okay, so we have here, as we mentioned, many abbreviations. So the first one is going to be, we have WHO, which means the World Health Organization. The second abbreviation, IMF, which is the International Monetary Fund. We have here WBG, which means the World Bank Group. And the last, the UN, which is the United Nations. Now, we can see that there are different goals that are mentioned here. We are going to read and just learn more about the goals that the G20 want to achieve together. Now, here you can see that there is a subtitle. We have here two questions. Now, I want the first one, who did the G20 promise to protect? And we have here, how did they plan to achieve that? Now, we're going to listen also.
Protect people's lives. While pledging to protect all people, the leaders placed an emphasis on protecting those who are most vulnerable. The ways they proposed to achieve this were by sharing information, exchanging data on the disease, sharing materials needed for research and development, and strengthening the world's health systems. They also prioritized manufacturing medical supplies and making them available to regions that needed them the most at affordable prices and as quickly as possible. The need to plan for possible future pandemics and increase research and development funding for vaccines and medicines was not forgotten either.
Okay, so let's see what the questions that we have here. Who did the G20 promise to protect? Now, this is the first question here. Now, we can see that at the very beginning here, we have, while pledging to protect all people, the leaders placed an emphasis on protecting those who are most vulnerable. Now, we have here, this is the same word that I mentioned before, but you can see that we have here the singular form of the verb, the word. Now, we have here the word pledging. Now, there is a pledge. Now, what is the meaning of pledging here, or when you pledge something? Now, pledge something means that you are kind of making a promise and you are putting this thing as an aim or a goal to achieve. Any type of pledge can be made. It can be something on a very big standard, like here, as we mentioned, or even something between you and yourself. Now, here, one of the pledges that can be made, that you can pledge to help old people or weak people, or we can just mention, as we have here, the word vulnerable. Now, here, old people, they are very vulnerable. They need other people to help them, but we can consider other things. Now, for example, babies are also vulnerable, and we can say that there are different creatures, like we have here delicate flowers. Now, all of these things we can describe people or things, they can be described to be vulnerable. We have the second question, how did they plan to achieve that? How did they plan to achieve that? You can see here the answer, by sharing information. exchanging data on the disease, sharing materials needed for research and development, and strengthening the world's health systems. They also prioritize manufacturing medical supplies and making them available to regions that needed them the most at affordable prices and as quickly as possible. Now moving on to the second subtitle here, you have the subtitle and we have one question. How much money did the G20 leaders say they would put into the economy? Now let's listen.
Safeguard the global economy and trade.
Safeguard here, the global economy. What is the meaning of safeguard? Now, from the word safe and guard, we join them together to make sure that you protect something and that it is safe or guarded. To complete,
the summit's statement outlined measures to minimize the pandemic's economic and social damage, support global growth, and make sure that global markets remain stable. This included injecting over $5 trillion into the global economy.
Okay, so we have here a short paragraph. Now the answer is very clear here. Now how much money did the G20 leaders say they would put into the economy? Of course, we have here over $5 trillion. Moving on to this part here. Now also, just following the same paragraph as before, we have here safeguard the global economy and trade. We're going to complete.
The G20 leaders expressed their confidence that their response would get the global economy back on its feet and set a strong basis for the protection of jobs and the recovery of growth. Another priority included minimizing disruptions to trade and global supply chains, and working to ensure the flow of important medical supplies, agricultural products, and other goods and services across borders.
You can see here the ways how they safeguarded different countries or areas in the world. Now there is a specific word that I want you just to focus on, which is the word disruptions. Now we have here another priority included minimizing disruptions to trade and global supply chains. Now disruptions means when you are moving on with something or doing something and you face some kind of disruption which messes a little bit or it just stops you, so you have to just to fix this part and just go back. So we can say that we have here disruption is very close to being disturbed. Now you have to just organize again and move on and stop whatever is disturbing. Now here we have a question. Did the G20 leaders promise to help only some countries? Now we did mention at the very beginning that they are a group of 20 countries or the group of 20. Now do they only help their own countries? This is something that we are going to listen and search for at the same time. Now we're going to start the title.
Improve global cooperation. After expressing their concern with the risks faced by countries, the leaders pledged to help all countries in need of assistance, and especially the developing and least developed countries that might be less able to cope with the situation. They also invited organizations such as the WHO, IMF, and WBG to cooperate further to support these countries facing health, economic, and social problems as a result of COVID-19.
Okay, so let's look for our answer here. We have here, did the G20 leaders promise? Now we can see from the very beginning, after expressing their concern with the risks faced by countries, the leaders pledged to help all countries in need of assistance. So of course, no, they do not just help their countries, and yes, they do help other countries as well. We have here the last part. Now you can see that there is a kind of quote here. We're going to read it together or listen to it together.
We are confident that, working closely together, we will overcome this. We will protect human life, restore global economic stability, and lay out solid foundations for strong, sustainable, balanced and inclusive growth, the G20 leaders concluded.
And actually, this is the conclusion and the closing paragraph that we have here in our lesson. So here, just to see that the most important thing to them or their aims are to restore or protect human life, restore global economic stability, and to lay out solid foundations for strong, sustainable, balanced, and inclusive growth. Now, these are the aims that we have here for the G20. We are going to go back to the words that we passed by through the discussion that we have here in the book. Now, the first word is disruption, as we mentioned. We have the word priority, we passed by it, summit, we have pledged, safeguard, vulnerable. You can just recall the meanings from the discussion that we have here, and we are going to go directly and fill in the blanks that we have here. So let's start with the exercise that we have on page number 111. Now, from the first part, we have here more laws need to be passed to blank. The planet, I don't think we're doing enough to protect it. So we're talking about laws here. So we have here, we are going to safeguard the planet. The student blank to follow the school's ethical code of conduct. Now, when we said that something as a promise can be made, we can say also that the student pledged. Number 3, the leaders of the 12 African countries attended the blank to discuss how to improve trade on the continent. So they attended the summit. So it doesn't have to be just these countries or specific countries. Any type of summit can be made, and we have here leaders of different countries can join together. We have here number 4, children are the most blank members of our society. So here we can say that like old people, they are vulnerable. We have here, you can help me wash the dishes, but that isn't a blank. Studying for your exams is much more important. So studying is the priority here. And coming to our last one, we have here a huge bird flew into our classroom today. It hopped from desk to desk, knocking over books and pens and causing a huge disruption in class. So it disturbed the class. Now, moving on to our comprehension questions that we have also on page number 111. We do have 5 questions here. We're going to pass by and just check the information that we learned throughout the lesson. Why was the summit held? Now, we did mention that it was held to discuss how to deal with the crisis caused by the pandemic. With which organizations did the G20 leaders say they would cooperate? We have here they would cooperate with international organizations such as the World Health Organization, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank Group, and the United Nations. We have number 3, what action did the G20 countries decide regarding medical supplies? We have here they would manufacture more medical supplies and making them available to regions that need them the most at the affordable prices and as quickly as possible. The 4th question, in what ways did the G20 leaders plan to help global trend? We did mention that they planned to make sure that there was no disruption in the flow of important medical supplies, agricultural products, and other goods and services across borders. Coming to our last question here, which countries would be the focus of G20 assistance? The G20 leaders would focus on helping developing and the least developed countries. Now we have reached the end of our lesson. We have the pair work on page number 111. So since we mentioned COVID-19 here, with a partner, make a list of the different ways the COVID-19 pandemic affected life in your country, then compare your list with the rest of the class. So you're going to just go back and mention the different solutions and the things that were done. Our outline of the day, we discussed the meaning of against the odds and related to experiences. We understood context through words and defined the vocabulary. Coming to the end to comprehend the importance of the G20, and this is your job here to discuss the effects of COVID-19. So this is our lesson of the day. I hope you enjoyed it. We have learned information or new things together.